Lord God, you have taught us that we are members one of another, and that none of us lives to themselves alone. We thank you for the community of which we are part of, for those who share with us in its activities, and for all who serve its various interests. Help us, as we have opportunity, to make our own contribution to the community and learn to be good neighbours, that by love we may serve one another. Almighty God, from whom comes every good and perfect gift, grant to those who hold office in this borough the spirit of justice and truth, of wisdom and charity, that mindful of their responsibility and of the needs of those they serve, they may promote the true welfare of your people and advance your kingdom on earth. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Could you remain standing, please, for a minute's silence for the sad passing of Michael Markham, Councillor for Ruislip Manor and Mayor of Hillingdon, and Michael Ball, Councillor for West Drayton. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Before the meeting starts, I would like to go through some house rules. May I remind all councillors on both sides of the chamber to please refrain from talking or having a conversation with your neighbour whilst a colleague is speaking. For a start, it is a tad impolite, and it makes it very difficult to hear what is being said. You all know the rules. Raise your hand if you want to raise a point or ask a question. I know we are all on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but we need to have respect for each other and show respect for the chair, which was sadly lacking at last month's full council. And if you are still tempted to interrupt, could I ask you to think on these wise words by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who said, "Don't raise your voice, improve your argument." Thank you. Right. Meeting. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, councillors and members of the public. I have a number of apologies from Councillors Burrows, Batt, Dott, Farley, Gardner, Lavery, Money and Smallwood. I just said Money.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes. To receive the minutes of the meeting. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you. You caught me off guard there. Apologies. Could I just ask, please, Madam Mayor, if we could make a very small amendment on page 5 of the minutes to include on paragraph 3, line 2, Ofsted and CQC, and also in paragraph 6, line 1, why it had taken an Ofsted and CQC inspection, please. Okay. Thank you.
All agreed? Is that? Right. Thank you. Okay. All agreed? Item 3, declarations of interest.
Madam Mayor, I just need to, on behalf of Mr Dickinson over here, declare a non-pecuniary interest in item 6, little 4, appointment of statutory officers.
Item 4, my announcements. Good evening. I would like to start with a quote, as you know. There is no greater thing you can do with your life and your work than follow your passions in a way that serves the world and you. The last few months have been extremely busy, and I am delighted to share with you some of my highlights of the community events and civic services I've had the privilege to attend. I have visited care homes, Connect's Coffee Morning, and was invited to be part of the celebrations for 3 residents' 100th birthday parties. Schools, beavers, junior sea cadets, elite study students from Spain, volunteers and community groups have been welcomed to the Mayor's Parlour. I have attended local religious group events, Hillingdon Gurkha Nepalese Annual Dasham Party, International Faith Assembly, and Diwali and Hindu New Year celebrations. It has been an absolute pleasure and a joy to be part of and to see firsthand the very talented musicians and artists we have in the borough. I've had the pleasure to open Wood End Park Academy, Minette Infant and Junior School, All Saints Church Bazaar and Wilko. There have been other events, too many to mention. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. It was an absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to switch on the Christmas lights at the Civic Centre forecourt on a rather cold Friday evening. We were treated to carols sung by school choirs and music from the wonderful Hillingdon Philharmonic Orchestra. Thank you to Councillor Becky Hagger and her sidekick, the pantomime dame, for working the crowds to get the show started. My thanks to the Project Search team for their help with wrapping gifts for the Mayor's shoebox raffle. My thanks too to Cheryl, Nikki, Anne, Andy, Chris, and all the volunteers for your help in making the Christmas lights switch on a wonderful, fun evening to remember. I was delighted to be asked to switch on the Christmas lights at the Uxbridge shopping centre and to share the stage with Santa. It was a ho, ho, ho celebration. I had the pleasure to switch on the Christmas lights at Ruislip Manor, which was a wonderful community event. Thank you all to the stallholders who donated gifts in aid of the Mayor's charity. Christmas lights have been switched on across the borough in churches, care homes, and there are more to switch on in December. I was honoured to lay wreaths at the Remembrance Sunday service and parade at Ruislip, Harefield Village, and the Royal Naval Association, Long Lane, Hillingdon. Forecourt Remembrance event on the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour. Together we remembered all those who lost their lives in the 2 world wars, other conflicts, and those who continue to be affected by war. I would like to thank all councillors who laid wreaths on behalf of the Mayor. The annual civic service for London mayors was held at Westminster Abbey. We celebrated evensong on the Feast of Dedication with the Dean of Westminster and one of my chaplains, Reverend Richard Young, a wonderful, wonderful event. The outward procession of the Lord Mayor's show was a colourful and splendid event. Countries from across the globe were represented with the quirky English traditions. The London Pearly Kings and Queens Harvest Festival at the Guildhall has been my highlight of civic ceremonies, a tradition which dates back to 1875. Watching London mayors skip around the Maypole, encouraged by the Maypole Queen, Donna Marie, and assisted by the Pearly Kings and Queens, was a sight to behold. We were entertained by Morris dancers and finished with a good old East End sing-along. We then walked from Guildhall to St Mary Le Bow Church, home of the Bow Bells, for the Harvest Festival service, a day to remember. After all that, I would like to leave you with this thought. To succeed in life, you need 3 things: a wishbone, a backbone, and a funny bone. Thank you. Item 5, public question time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members will be aware that the public questions before us this evening fall broadly into two subject categories, and members may also be aware that under the Constitution, the Mayor has the right to group questions of a similar nature together. So the Mayor's intention is to have questions 5.1, 5.4 and 5.10 asked first, and for Councillor Bianco then to give an answer to those questions, and then questions 5.2, 3, 5, 7, 8 and 9 asked, and Councillor O'Brien to give an answer, and finally question 5.6 to the leader. A number of the questioners have asked for you to read out the questions for them, Madam Mayor, starting with 5.1, question from Jonathan Haynes.
Given that Blue Horizon have been appointed as consultants to find a new operator to run the Beck Theatre, what assurance can London Borough of Hillingdon give that they will act fast and with urgency to secure a new operator, assuming one is found, and ensure the Beck's long-term future? We are at a critical phase and have warned that if the venue closes in January, it will be very difficult for it to reopen. We need to ensure a deal is agreed in order for a seamless decoupling with Trafalgar and keep the doors open.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And now question 5.4 from Harpel Tamba, who I believe has also asked for you to read out the question.
Can the Council categorically confirm or deny that they are in possession of drawings showing a new residential development scheme on the Beck Theatre site?
And finally, 5.10, question from Eilish Stone, who I believe is present. So we have a microphone coming towards you now.
My relationship with the Beck goes back over 30 years when my sons performed with the youth theatre and in the summer projects. This gave them skills for life, transferable to many different careers, including performing arts. Our council's tardy response to securing the future of the theatre has caused much upset and uncertainty to the employees, the service users and community groups. As a member of the community choir, I despair of our elected council and cabinet members who claim to put residents first. It seems you only woke up from your slumber when our media campaign to save the Beck took off. Before that, it was silence.
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Mr Haynes in his absence, Ms Stone, who is present, and I'd also like to thank Councillor Davis, whose question at 9.5 and members' questions I intend to answer in one go. I will answer Mr Tamber's question at the end of this answer, because it's a slightly different variation on the whole. Madam Mayor, Hillingdon Council were both surprised and disappointed by Trafalgar's decision to discontinue negotiations regarding the future operation of the Beck Theatre on a without subsidy basis. Subsequent attempts by the Council to find a workable solution with Trafalgar have proved unsuccessful due to demands that the Council could not agree to. Following Trafalgar's decision, the Council has acted swiftly to appoint Blue Horizon, who are leading theatre consultants, to find a new operator for the Beck Theatre. Blue Horizon set to work immediately and have undertaken extensive work to reach out to interested parties. And this work included the preparation of a comprehensive data room and subsequently a viewing day at which I was present and which was attended by 6 or 7 separate commercial theatre groups interested in taking on the Beck. A full inspection was undertaken on that day for the interested parties, and any questions asked were answered by both Blue Horizon, senior officers of the Council who were present, or myself. Expressions of interest were sought from interested parties by Monday last, and I understand that 4 expressions of interest have been received, and these are currently being evaluated. The desire of this Council is to find a partner who shares our commitment to secure the long-term future for the venue and to ensure a continued and hopefully improved cultural experience that can be enjoyed in the borough. To address further comments made by Ms Stone in her very similar question, I would add the following. There has been a notion of delays suggested by social media comment, which is wholly inaccurate and designed to imply inefficiency where none exists. These comments do not accurately reflect the time, work and commitment made by officers and elected members to try and reach agreement on a new management arrangement which the current providers and the Council could agree on. As stated earlier, the Council was surprised by Trafalgar's decision to discontinue negotiations with Hillingdon Council, and subsequent attempts by the Council to find a workable solution with Trafalgar proved unsuccessful due to demands that the Council could not agree to. The Council has made it clear on many occasions over the last few months that it cannot agree to extend any monetary subsidy beyond this financial year, particularly bearing in mind Trafalgar's financial standing and their commercial status within the theatre market. The Council has acted swiftly once it was clear that Trafalgar were unwilling to negotiate further, appointing Blue Horizon, who are specialists in this field, to find a new operator for the Beck. Moving on to the comments made by the question raised by Mr. Tamber, which I will read just to be clear where the difference is. Mr. Tamber's inquiry was that the Council categorically confirm or deny that they are in possession of drawings showing a new residential development scheme on the Beck Theatre site. To answer this question, I can inform those present here tonight that a feasibility study, which included some outline high-level option plans and drawings, was prepared in early 2023 as part of a wider piece of work looking at the whole surrounding area. However, I can confirm also that the study pointed out that the site was unsuitable for residential from a planning perspective, as it is regarded as open space, and that if residential was to be allowed, it would have only been on a very small scale, making the whole idea completely unviable. I would quote from the report a planning comment. I have the report here, and the planning comment is here. Theatre location deemed not suitable for residential development, as this will create a landmark building and within public open space, creating issues in relation to overlooking and increased traffic. Lastly, it is important to note that this work predates by some considerable time the recent discussions with Trafalgar. The Council has no intentions at this time of residential development on this site. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Begenko.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We move to the second set of questions, starting with 5.2, question from Emily Hopler.
What evidence suggests to support the Council's claim that there is no demand for the SRP at Copeford School when families like mine requested placements, and I have had multiple emails from February before the consultation closed stating that the SRP was no longer accepted admissions, suggesting that this decision was predetermined?
On your behalf, Madam Mayor, 5.3 from Bethany Gates.
Regarding the proposal to close the SRP at Copeford Infant School, how can the Council claim that children in the SRP are in a mainstream setting 100% of the time, when we have clear evidence, including timetables, that show speech and language therapy, physiotherapy and other essential interventions are provided outside the classroom in a specialised setting within the school?
Thank you. And on your behalf, Madam Mayor, question from Georgina Swaker.
Thank you. The recent consultation... Sorry.
The recent consultation report on the SRP at Copeford states that children with physical disabilities can have their needs met in any mainstream school. However, parents report being turned away because local schools state they lack the necessary resources. How can the Council justify closing the SRP without first ensuring that all mainstream schools are adequately equipped and prepared to meet the needs of physically disabled children?
Thank you. Madam Mayor, question 5.7 from Stacey McGoran. I believe is not here, so I ask you to read out the question on her behalf.
The Council states that the SRP closure at Copeford School is in the name of inclusivity. Yet this decision removes vital therapies for children with physical disabilities without clear guarantees, funding or support to replace them. How can this be considered inclusive when it leaves families struggling and children without the specialist care they need? Is this decision truly about inclusion, or is it a cost-cutting measure?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And similarly, question 5.8 from Nikki Hudson, I believe is not here, wishes you to ask that on her behalf.
As a parent, I am concerned that EHCPs don't cover essential costs like therapy and equipment, leaving already deficit schools to fill the gap. How will the Council ensure my child's needs are fully funded without shifting the burden onto schools?
And finally, Madam Mayor, a question from Leanne Fisher. Who is it?
Yeah.
The Council claims nothing will change as SRP therapies move to the NHS, yet this shift risks harmful delays for children with special needs, causing developmental regression and long-term damage. How can the Council deny this harm, and what steps are being taken to address it?
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I thank Ms Hopler, Gates, Swaker and Fisher for their questions, and in the absence of Ms McGoran and Hudson, also for their questions regarding the recent consultation for Coatford Infant School's proposed closure of the physical disability specialist resource provision. I would like to advise this evening that we are unable to discuss individual cases during this meeting. However, I would like to assure that we consider the needs of each individual child when they are placed in their educational provision. There is not a demand for children to attend the physical disability SRP at Coatford Infant School, and this was highlighted in the recent Select Committee paper, which showed the reducing number of places both locally and nationally. Many children with a physical disability have their needs met within mainstream schools with reasonable adjustments. More so, every mainstream school has a duty to make reasonable adjustments to ensure children with a physical disability are not discriminated against. As well as support for children in mainstream schools, Hillingdon also has specialist provision for children with a range of complex needs as well as physical disabilities, where these needs can also be met appropriately. Currently, all children at Coatford Infant School access all of their lessons in an inclusive mainstream classroom. However, some receive therapeutic support within and outside of the classroom. A SRP would generally operate part of a child's timetable in a separate classroom or area in the school, and children in an SRP generally attend 50 to 85% of their timetable in mainstream lessons. In an SRP, a teacher is generally assigned to provide and oversee and deliver the curriculum according to the individual child's needs. Coatford Infants have confirmed they do not have a separate space to educate children within the school. In essence, there is no separate classroom or area. Whilst children do have therapy input outside of the classroom, I would refer you to my earlier comment that this is in line and to be expected in all settings to provide a reasonable adjustment for a child. At the end of January 2024, there were 56 children and young people with a primary need of physical disability being educated and supported in mainstream schools across Hillingdon, compared to 13 and the young people with a primary need of physical disabilities being supported in SRPs across the borough. All schools are expected to make reasonable adjustments to meet the needs of children with a physical disability, which is a statutory duty. The local area SEND and Alternative Provision Strategy 2023 to 2028 explains the importance of fully inclusive education and the work that is ongoing to ensure that children are supported in the most appropriate settings. The Council will continue to work with settings to ensure they are inclusive for children and young people with additional needs. Parents should engage immediately with their educational healthcare coordinators with concerns around schools turning away children because of lack of resources. Resources are provided to schools to ensure they can meet the needs detailed in EHCPs. There is also a separate process for schools to apply for funding towards equipment. Provision outlined in a child's EHCP is statutory, and there is no suggestion to change this provision as part of the proposal. Therapies are being delivered across all schools to meet the needs of the provision outlined in individual EHCPs and is delivered by CNWL, who are jointly commissioned by the Council and the Integrated Care Board. SRPs typically commission their own therapies. The proposed closure could potentially mean children's therapies would be delivered by a different provider as part of the Century Commission contract. However, there will be no change to the amount of contacts a child receives, as it is detailed in their EHCP, which is again statutory. As the levels of funding available for each child will not change as a result of the proposal, Coatford Infants has the choice whether to retain their current therapists or to opt for a therapy service available to all other mainstream schools in Hillingdon. Currently, CNWL supports children with an EHCP attending Coatford Infants. All therapies delivered through the jointly commissioned service are in a school setting within Hillingdon, unless a family requests otherwise as an exception. Therefore, regardless of the decision of the school, therapy will continue to be delivered at the school for any child currently on roll at the SRP. This is the current situation for all children accessing therapy across all of Hillingdon mainstream schools, including children in Coatford Infants. Therefore, no therapies, support or funding will be removed as a result of this proposal. Children with EHCPs have their therapy provision outlined in their EHCPs. For mainstream schools, the therapy is delivered by CNWL, and therefore schools do not receive separate funding for therapies, as this is commissioned separately and centrally. The Council has an equipment policy in place where the school contributes the first £1,000 for equipment required to meet any assessed needs, with the Council providing the additional funding above that threshold. This process is outside of the EHC provision and funding. Every EHCP details the therapeutic requirements to meet their need, and the Council will ensure that these needs continue to be met. The decision about who provides the therapy is a discussion between the Council and Coatford Infants, should the proposal be approved. The proposal does not change the funding the school receives, so Coatford Infants have the option to retain the current private therapists while the children on roll at the SRP remain in the school. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor.
Madam Mayor, that just leaves us question 5.6 from Linda Gates to the Leader of the Council.
The results report on the consultation to close the SRP at Coatford Infants state that 96% of the community want the SRP to stay, showing overwhelming opposition to its closure. Given the fundamental purpose of a consultation is to consider the community impact and opinions, does the Leader of the Council genuinely care about the views of the constituents, or will this decision disregard the voices of the very people it affects most?
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms Gates, for your question. And in short, yes, of course, I care about the view of residents, all residents. Tonight, though, in giving a fuller answer, I must be careful in what I say, as the decision about Coatford Infant School SRP has not been taken by Cabinet, and I cannot be seen to be predetermining the issue. I will therefore limit myself to more general comments at this stage. The purpose of consultation is to exchange information and opinions to reach a better understanding and to make better decisions. It is not a referendum, which is a direct vote for or against a proposal. Consultation allows residents and others to draw the Council's attention to an issue that may not have been considered with the Council formed a proposal. It may point to something overlooked, misjudged, or given inappropriate weighting. By residents feeding back information, Council officers are better able to test the thinking and assumptions that shaped a proposal, so that better recommendations are made to Cabinet or Council. In its decision making, the Cabinet must also consider the interests of all residents, including those that didn't respond to a consultation but might nonetheless be impacted by the proposals either directly or indirectly. The Council wants barriers to the progress of disabled children to be broken down, and this would not be achieved if our decisions were to end or diminish the support disabled children need to flourish in school. We want disabled children to have the same choice as other children when it comes to their education. We want the funding for disabled children to follow them so that they are able to choose their local school, safe in the knowledge that their needs will be met. We want disabled children to be able to socialise in school with other children from their immediate neighbourhood so that they feel part of that neighbourhood and form local friendships. And we want all children to grow and learn in an inclusive setting so that our younger generation have a better understanding and more tolerance of others. The Cabinet will receive a full report of the outcome of the consultation progress as part of the decision-making process, and it will consider those responses as well as the questions asked this evening when reaching its decision. Thank you again for your question. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Item 6. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 6 is the report of the Head of Democratic Services. It is in 4 parts, which I will move in one. The first part is asking Council to note the 2 urgent decisions taken since we last met. Both relate to building. The second relates to the changes in my Cabinet, which was announced to members previously, and this is bringing formal notification for that. And in doing so, I wish to place on record, if I may, my thanks to Councillor Mills for his extraordinary length of service, 22 years as a Cabinet member. I doubt that that length of service will ever be repeated again. It is really quite exceptional. As a consequence of those changes, there is necessary to change the portfolios, some slight readjustment, and as a consequence of that, some further slight readjustment to the terms of reference of the Select Committee, and I am asking for delegation to the Head of Democratic Services to make those very minor changes so that there is continuity between the Select Committees and the Cabinet members. The third part is the change to the committee members consequent to the change of Cabinet, with some minor changes of personnel. And the fourth is to note the appointment of the statutory officers and for Council to agree to the recommendation that Dan Dickinson be appointed as the statutory role of the monitoring officer, Mr Dickinson having been appointed as the Head of Legal Services. Recommendation B is specifically there to note that Mr Dickinson is employed on an agency basis and not as a permanent employee, and that gives rise to the recommendation at B. So together, Madam Mayor, I move all the recommendations under all 4 sections of that report. Thank you.
Is there a seconder?
I second and reserve my right.
Are there any other speakers? No. Is that agreed? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Agenda item 7 is the second report from the Head of Democratic Services. It concerns the review of the polling districts following the recent election. The report is set out and gives detail for each ward at Appendix B. It is recommending no change in 11 of the wards, as stated in those appendices. It is recommended a review for 8 of the wards, as listed under A, to look at alternative use polling station where schools are presently being used in those wards. It was a common feature of feedback from residents that we should be avoiding schools wherever possible, and I believe that we should re-examine the use of schools in those areas. And the final point is for a more detailed examination of the polling arrangements in 2 wards, Charville and Ruislip wards, as representations have been made by residents and by ward councillors concerning those arrangements. I so move those recommendations. Thank you.
Is there a seconder?
I second and reserve my right.
Any other speakers? Is that agreed? Right. Item 8, Youth Justice Plan. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, let's get to my page. I would like to formally propose the Council's Youth Justice Plan for 2024-2029, which is on page 67. Thank you.
Is there a seconder?
Yes, I second, Madam Mayor.
Are there any other speakers? Is that agreed? Item 9, members' questions. Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It has been widely publicised that local authorities in England and Wales are experiencing serious financial difficulties. Can the Cabinet member please comment on the extent to which these difficulties are expected to have an impact on the London Borough of Hillingdon, particularly in light of the budget monitoring pressures in the current financial year recently reported at Cabinet? Thank you.
Is there a supplementary question? Sorry, beg your pardon, Councillor Goddard.
Reverse order.
You needed a funny bone, didn't
I can do it the other
I?
way round if you prefer. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Banerjee for your question. There can be little doubt that the system of funding for local government in this country has failed. Over the last 15 years, central government funding for councils has declined in real terms by 7%. Whilst over the same period, inflation, increased demand, and the imposition of additional statutory responsibilities have driven the cost bases of local authorities sky high. The Local Government Association made a submission to the Treasury as recently as October of this year, and this reported that councils in England face a 2.3 billion funding gap in 25-26, and indeed that this gap is expected to widen to 3.9 billion pounds in 26-27. In other words, a shortfall of income against budgets of 6.2 billion pounds across the next 2 financial years. Major factors in this pressure are adult social care costs, which have caused a 3.7 billion pound growth in spend across the last 5 years, homelessness costs, which have grown by 604 million pounds, and home to school transport costs for children with special educational needs, which have risen by 63%. Amongst London councils alone, a collective pressure of £600 million has been reported for 24-25 budgets, and the signs are very clear that this is going to be far worse in the immediate years that lie ahead. Madam Mayor, all of these issues were apparent before Rachel Reeves made her autumn budget statement, but it is now absolutely clear that Labour has utterly failed to deliver on its promises of a step change in local government funding, greater certainty, and jam tomorrow. The pledge of additional slender funding for local authorities that we've actually seen is clearly outweighed by the impact of increasing cost pressures arising from employers' national insurance, the increase in the national minimum wage, the public sector pay settlements, all of which are bound to sustain and indeed increase the spike in inflation already reported this month. Furthermore, we were promised a 3-year settlement which would give us certainty and a greater ability to plan for the future. What we actually receive is a single-year settlement with all the inherent uncertainty that this brings. Hillingdon has followed a policy of seeking to minimise capital tax increases wherever possible in order to support residents' household finances. The consequence of this, therefore, is that we have just about the lowest level of council tax in London and hence less income to absorb these pressures. It therefore follows that the process for setting the budget, which will come to Cabinet in December, is fraught with difficulty and will present us with numerous tough decisions. Madam Mayor, this is not a Hillingdon problem, but rather a national problem which all councils are experiencing, and this will continue until there is a realistic and substantive reform of funding structures for local authorities. We therefore recognise that for the foreseeable future, we are on our own in fixing these challenges here in Hillingdon, but we will navigate through them once again, bringing to bear our expertise and strength in sound financial management. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Is there a supplementary question?
Yes, Madam Mayor, there is. Can the Cabinet Member please comment on the implications of the increases in employers' national insurance and the national minimum wage announced in the Government's autumn budget statement upon the Council's financial position, please? Thank you.
Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Banerjee, once again. Given that the question of the increase in the employer's national insurance is the subject of a motion later on the agenda for this meeting, I will keep my comments brief. It was expected that the Chancellor would seek to increase the rate of national insurance in her autumn budget statement. Like many aspects of this statement, this much had been leaked to the media well in advance. What was not expected was the lowering of the pay threshold at which employers' NI becomes due and payable. The Chancellor has indicated that she wishes to mitigate the burden on public sector bodies, and it is clear that she has a clearly defined sum set aside to do this. The problem with this approach, quite simply, is that there is an ever-growing volume of demand for the mitigation of this burden, be it from GPs' practices, hospitals, charities, and many other bodies which seek to define themselves within the public sector. It must therefore be highly unlikely that the extra burden that will fall upon the Council will be fully removed. However, sadly, this is not the end of this story, because like many local authorities, Hillingdon outsources the provision of substantial element of its service offerings to third-party, commercially owned and run contractors, none of whom, of course, will be able to benefit from relief from central government. This and the continuing escalation in the national minimum wage will manifest themselves as price inflation in respect to the services provided, and we expect this to run into many millions of pounds. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the Cabinet Member for Children and Families explain what will happen to those children with physical disabilities that will be remaining at Coatford Infant School after the proposed closure of the SRP funding if the percentage of children having educational, health and care plans falls below the threshold at which the Council provides this non-statutory funding?
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Punja, for your question. There will be no impact on funding following the proposed closure of the SRP for the 2 children currently on roll from September 2025 until they leave Coatford Infant School. If the number of children with an EHC falls below the threshold at which the Council provides non-statutory exceptional funding, the Council has committed to continuing the equivalent funding of £6,000. Thank you.
Is there a supplementary question?
There is, Madam Mayor. In the report and also in the Select Committee meeting on the 13th of November, and now they say that nothing will change. But things will change because actually with the funding, although you committed to the funding, if that falls below, it is not guaranteed, and we don't know that that's going to be committed because as budgets change. So can you actually confirm and agree that that funding will be continued and guaranteed to those children?
Okay. Councillor O'Brien.
I mean, notwithstanding repeating what I've actually just said, which I have just said, what she's just asked again, that the Council has committed to continuing the equivalent funding of £6,000. So the answer is yes.
Item 9 for question by Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Given that there's a high demand for housing, can the Cabinet member please provide an update on how this is being done to prevent homelessness in Hillingdon?
Councillor Tuckwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Higgins for your question. But before I respond this evening, I'd like to formally place on record my sincere gratitude to our officer teams for their unwavering passion and dedication in supporting our residents through difficult, complex and challenging housing situations right across Hillingdon. Without their commitment and tireless efforts, many of the positive outcomes that we achieve for our residents would not be possible. But Madam Mayor, I welcome the question this evening as it allows me to provide an update on what the Council's ongoing commitment to tackling housing demand and preventing homelessness right across Hillingdon. We are taking a proactive approach to ensure that we are meeting the needs of our residents effectively and sustainably. Hillingdon Council is unwavering in its commitment during these challenging times when housing pressures are at unprecedented levels. Like many boroughs across London, Hillingdon is facing a perfect storm of pressures, a significant rise in homelessness presentations, spiralling costs of temporary accommodation and a shortage of affordable housing options. In 2023-24, we recorded a staggering 28% increase in homelessness approaches compared to that of the previous year. More than 2/3 of these were from single-person households. The leading causes are evictions from private rented accommodation, domestic abuse and family exclusions, reflecting systemic issues in housing affordability and availability. Madam Mayor, despite these pressures, Hillingdon Council is taking decisive steps to prevent homelessness and mitigate its impact. Strengthening our triage, response and mediation services to keep people in homes wherever possible. Collaborating with landlords to resolve disputes, address arrears and secure alternative private sector placements to avoid the need of costly temporary accommodation. We're also delivering support for domestic abuse survivors, including risk assessments and safety planning, and developing protocols for hospital discharges to prevent homelessness upon leaving. Our prevention efforts have also extended to securing 259 private sector placements supporting 82 households to sustain their existing tenancies and partnering with organisations such as Trinity and the YMCA to support those vulnerable individuals. All of these efforts come at growing financial cost, with our borough spending millions annually on temporary accommodation, a figure rising sharply each year. The situation here in Hillingdon mirrors a broader crisis across London, where boroughs are now spending an eye-watering £114 million every month on temporary accommodation. Without substantial and sustained government intervention, councils will remain financially stretched and unable to address the true root causes of homelessness. Whilst we are doing everything in our power to protect vulnerable residents, it is clear that local councils cannot tackle this crisis alone. The government must step up and provide the funding and resources necessary to match the scale of the housing emergency. Until then, Madam Mayor, Hillingdon will continue to lead by example. But how much longer can councils shoulder the burden without Westminster delivering the support that our residents deserve? Thank you.
Is there a supplementary question?
Yes, there is. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the answer from the Cabinet member. Can the Cabinet member update the Council on the work being undertaken in Hillingdon to reduce the pressures on temporary accommodation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you again, Councillor Higgins, for your supplementary question. So, across Hillingdon, there is a temporary accommodation strategy underway already, which will be presented to the Cabinet in January 2025. The strategy focuses on 4 key objectives: reducing homelessness demand and increasing rates of successful homeless preventions, increasing rates of move-on from temporary to settled accommodation, reducing the average nightly expenditure on temporary accommodation by negotiating with landlords, exiting high-cost accommodations and replacing them with a more cost-effective option. The Council is also committed to a new social housing supply programme aiming to acquire 500 new social rented homes by March 2027. And key initiatives may include modular housing for temporary accommodation, acquiring additional properties for immediate use, and unlocking stalled development sites to secure 35% affordable housing gains. Addressing temporary accommodation pressures requires more than just reactive measures. That's why we are focused on increasing housing supply. We are partnering with the private sector to make better use of our existing stock, providing financial assistance schemes to help residents secure private rentals, and leveraging relationships with charities and support groups. These partnerships are crucial for both creating immediate and sustainable housing options. We are also taking direct action to alleviate pressure on temporary accommodation. The Council has invested in acquiring properties to use for temporary accommodation, reducing reliance on very costly external providers. Additionally, we've designed our housing team processes to ensure faster response and increased support for those facing homelessness. However, the root cause of these crises go beyond the remit of local councils. Inadequate central government support coupled with the exodus of private landlords from the market have left councils like ours struggling to meet the demand. The cost to the taxpayer is spiralling, and as councils are forced to spend ever-increasing amounts on temporary accommodation. This, Madam Mayor, is unsustainable. Without urgent reforms to housing policy, fairer funding for council and measures to incentivise landlords to remain in the rental market, we risk a homelessness crisis of unprecedented proportions. Hillingdon's Conservative administration is committed to doing everything in its power to support our residents. But, Madam Mayor, let me be clear. The people of Hillingdon deserve more than a stick-in-plaster solution. They deserve a government that treats the housing crisis as a national priority. It's not just a local issue, it is a national emergency. If this government is serious about levelling up and supporting communities, it must start by fixing Britain's housing system. Anything less is a betrayal of the hard-working families and vulnerable individuals who rely on a stable home as a foundation for their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tuckworth. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education, Councillor Susan O'Brien. The report to the Cabinet meeting of the 5th of November 2024, Agenda Item 7, page 125, paragraph 14, states that the designated schools grant cumulative deficit carried forward to 25-26 is forecast at 68.8 million. As the statutory override, which currently separates this deficit from the Council's general fund reserves, is in place only until March 2026, what plan does the Council have in paying back this deficit, which is greater than the Council's reserves, if the statutory override is not extended beyond March 2026? Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sweeting, for your question. And you're absolutely right, the statutory override currently expires in March 2026. It is anticipated, though, although without certainty, that these arrangements will be extended beyond this point. If a Labour government decides that the ring fence is not the way forward, then the dedicated schools grants deficits will become not only a Hillingdon issue, but a national issue, whereby a resolution to support local authorities with their DSG debit balances will have to be found. In the meantime, this council is not complacent and is working with school leaders from all provisions via the schools forum to consider a range of available options, none of which are easy. And we will continue to dig deep and have the uncomfortable conversations to reduce the deficit. The Council has started to make progress in slowing down the in-year growth in new cases, as with its work on those ceasing plans. The Council acknowledges the tremendous work that our schools undertake in educating Hillingdon children, and I thank our education officers who are working so very hard to meet the demand for high needs places, and I would strongly urge Government to provide a national solution to this issue urgently. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sweeting.
Is there a supplementary question, Councillor Sweeting?
I thank the Cabinet Member for her answer. So, with the probability that this council would indeed be bankrupt if government does not extend the statutory override due to end in March 2026, please provide the history as to why and how this council managed to get into this financial cliff edge, seeing that the majority of councils, some 279 councils out of 317 in England, or over 88%, have not needed to seek the financial bailout from government, which Hillingdon has been forced to do.
Councillor O'Brien.
I won't be able to provide Councillor Sweeting with a completely comprehensive response this evening, but what I would say is that the scheme is closed, so even if other local authorities wanted to get into a safety valve agreement, that's not actually happening at the moment. And I would also say that there are many authorities that are in exactly the same situation as us and much worse than what we are. And again, we're only working to what we have and what we're able to do at this moment in time.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Point 95, Councillor Davis.
Madam Mayor, given the comprehensive and encouraging answer from Councillor Bianco that he's provided with the public questions, I'm happy and I feel my question has been answered. So I won't be asking a question. Thank you.
Councillor Bianco. 9-1. Oh, all right. Councillor Burks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With an ever-increasing demand and waits for GP services, can the Cabinet Member please provide an update on the expenditure of funds received from the St Andrews development on the RAF Uxbridge site for primary health care in Uxbridge?
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Bells, for your question. As members will be aware, local NHS providers are responsible for the delivery of health services. Consequently, the Council holds any S106 planning obligation fundings for new health provision on behalf of the NHS as set out in our service level agreement. Of the 624,500 of Section 106 health funding received from the St Andrews development, the following allocations have been made at the request of the NHS. In June 2015, 177,000 was allocated to make capacity improvements to Uxbridge Health Centre. The remaining balance of 447,150 was allocated to provide a new health hub for the Uxbridge area in August 2024. It is understood that the NHS are in the process of identifying options for the new health hub and developing the relevant business case.
Is there a supplementary question?
Thank you. Thank the Cabinet Member for the answer. And I think you've answered my supplementary for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bells. My sheer privilege.
9-7. Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the Cabinet Member please give the Council an update on the disposal of Barrow Hall in light of recent disinformation spread by the Hillingdon Labour Group?
Councillor Bianco.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bridges. As I'm sure you're aware, Councillor Bridges and Madam Mayor, the background to this is that central government has given a directive to all local authorities to actively conduct disposal programmes of surplus assets. Barrow Hall is one such asset. It has a long history within the borough, being the home of the Hayes and Harlington Urban District Council before the creation of the London Borough of Hillingdon. However, for some time, it has been an underutilised building, no longer suited to modern working. Only one small part of the building was being used as a children's centre by the Council's Children's Services Department. In accordance with the Council's Family Hub strategy, the Barrow Hall Children's Centre was relocated to the Hayes Family Hub in January of this year, and Councillor O'Brien and I went to the opening of said hub and saw what a splendid state-of-the-art space and facility it was. And the staff that were at the Barrow Hall Centre have also been relocated to alternative centres. Now, Barrow Hall is a listed building and would have required significant investment to bring it up to a usable standard for council services. Had there been any, we had wished to provide that. That investment would have also had to be made had we wished to offer a lease to an external party. And the conclusion we reached that the investment that would have been needed would not have been produced an effective return. The decision was therefore made by the council to dispose of the asset, and this decision has resulted in a considerable receipt for the council in excess of an external valuation, significantly in excess of an external valuation, and through the not inconsiderable efforts of the Director of Property, to whom we must offer a vote of thanks, a disposal has been effected to HRUC, which is Harrow, Richmond and Uxbridge Colleges. This sale to HRUC not only brings in the sizable receipt to which I have just referred, but also helps the council significantly, as it is their intention to use the building once refurbished to provide much needed SEND provision in the 18 to 25 category. The asset was also sold with a restriction on title that only allows it to be used for education purposes in the future. So even if HRUC were to eventually dispose of the building to another party, that other party would have to continue to use it for education purposes. HRUC will be offering SEND spaces within the borough, which is in line with the council's SEND and AP strategy and the 5 ambitions for our children. The provision of local education placements also supports the council's safety valve plan by reducing the need for young people to be educated in out-of-borough settings. So to sum up, Cabinet approval was given to the disposal of this asset, which firstly creates a significant capital receipt above valuation, secondly creates a financial saving in line with the SEND safety valve plan and on an ongoing basis, thirdly ensures the asset has continued to be used as an asset that serves residents, and fourthly secured an educational use going forward into perpetuity, therefore protecting the asset to serve the community at all times going forward. Councillor Bridges, I'm sure you will agree with me that this is an excellent result for the council and its residents. It is a good news story.
Is there a supplementary question?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the Cabinet Member please explain what has been the impact of the Council's revised fostering offer since its launch?
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Makwana, for your question this evening. The revised fostering offer was officially launched in May 2024 and is currently in the early stages of implementation. Foster carers play a crucial role in supporting and providing safe and stable homes and a nurturing environment for children who cannot live with their birth families for whatever reason. Stability is essential for children's emotional and psychological well-being, and foster carers are key to child development and help develop social, emotional and educational skills. Having enough Hillingdon foster carers to support our children to continue to live their lives in the local communities, helping maintain important connections to their schools, friends and their cultural backgrounds is essential. The latest figures produced by Ofsted show that foster carers are at an all-time low, not just here but nationally, and more have been resigning than signing up. The new fostering offer aims to recruit more local households to foster our children and places our carers along with our children at the heart of it. The service has changed its recruitment approach, simplified the application process and enlisted new assessors to ensure a timely delivery of outcomes. Training and support for carers has been enhanced, including PACE training, which stands for Playfulness, Acceptance, Curiosity and Empathy, as well as access to online courses. And I can confirm that Councillor Makwana has been on the PACE training this evening. The launch piqued interest and officers have seen a substantial increase in fostering inquiries, indicating that our new approach is reaching potential foster carers and raising awareness about the importance of fostering. Since May, we have had just under 200 expressions of interest, compared with 43 during the same period last year. This has already more than doubled the number of households progressing to full assessment. This includes experienced foster carers who like the Hillingdon offer and new households who are being assessed for the first time. There are many factors contributing to the success of the new offer. I'll name just a few. The enhanced recruitment process has increased our assessment capacity to improve the assessment timelines. Training 60 carers in PACE training and all of the other additional training that helps residential staff in supporting children transitioning from residential care to a foster and placement or to family environments, providing an unrivalled payment and benefits package for both new and existing foster carers. We've launched the Mockingbird family model in Hillingdon. We have successfully recruited our first home hub, which has 8 families around it, and we hope to have a second hub in place in April 2025. These developments in the service highlights the Council's dedication to enhancing fostering outcomes and ensuring that children receive high quality care in a family-based environment. Thank you.
Is there a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item 10. Councillor Edwards.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. I move the motion as published on the order paper. The increase in the employer's national insurance contribution, the reduction in the threshold for payments, was announced by the Chancellor in the budget at the end of last month and has been resoundingly criticised by business leaders as being anti-business and anti-growth. The Chancellor sought to sell the increase in the employer's national insurance contribution as not impacting on working families, a tax to be paid by business. This is proven to be a falsehood. In a joint open letter, 70 of the country's biggest businesses have said the effect will be to increase inflation, slow play growth, cause shop closures, reduce jobs, especially at the entry level. Entrepreneurs and company owners are now speaking out, especially in the hospitality trade, saying it's inevitable that companies will now have to shed jobs, will not take on so many apprentices and young people, and consumers will face higher prices. Another impact, given less media attention coverage to date, but that is beginning to change, is the impact of the change in national insurance will have on councils and the companies and charities that help support residents. We have already heard from Councillor Goddard an assessment of that. Whilst government have said, but not yet confirmed, that they will compensate local authorities for the direct cost from the change of the increase the employer's national insurance contributions, they have not made any such undertaking with regards to the companies that provide services to the council, particularly our charities and our care companies. It is inevitable that those care companies and charities will seek to pass on those additional costs to the local authority if they are to maintain the same level of service. And provision, as we have heard, is being made in next year's budget for many millions of pounds to pay for this additional burden. At a time when councils' finances are under so much pressure through the cost of social care and homelessness about which we have also heard this evening, the Council is simply unable to absorb this new pressure. When Rachel Reeves gave her budget speech a few weeks ago, she repeated a stock Labour line. I said there would be no return to austerity. That is the choice I have made today. The truth is that local austerity is not just grinding on, but getting worse. Those are not my words. They are the words of the journalist John Harris, published in The Guardian on Sunday, the 17th of November. This new and additional financial pressures leaves us no option but to reaffirm our commitment to sound financial management, meaning that we must make financial plans and decisions based on what we have and not what we want. The administration's changes to reduce cost have been opposed at just about every turn by the opposition, be it the move of the Uxbridge Library, the disposal of redundant buildings such as the Borough Hall, maybe even the ending of subsidy to commercial theatre in the borough. The impact of employers' national insurance contributions will be to increase our cost by many millions, which will have to be managed through reduction in staffing numbers, further increases in fees and charges to residents, and potentially even now cuts to services. It is becoming increasingly clear that working families will pay for the government's national insurance tax increase through lower employment, lower wages, higher mortgages and higher costs to the council, forcing further change in the services we are able to provide our residents. Let us now stand together in support of our residents and jointly express to government our great concern at the cost they are imposing on us to their ill-thought-out increase in national insurance, and let us reaffirm our commitment to sound financial management. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Madam Mayor, I second, and I reserve my right to speak last.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, the budget brought us a lesson in Labour economics. The government will take £1, then off that pound, 25p will go into administration, 25p will go into a fashionable cause. And you know what? 50p can go back to you, and you're going to be grateful for that 50p. That is Labour economics. The NI charge is going to hit hard on those organisations which are low-margin businesses and can't raise funds easily, and also those that need people. Robots won't do, and they can't outsource it. So who is that? One of the big companies and sectors that will be hit will be organisations and charities that provide social care. Well, why does that matter? Staff who work in social care, many of whom are already underpaid, will continue to be paid less because the money will not be there to give them the raises they deserve. So the money that should be going to them will be going to the government instead. Also, many smaller providers will stop providing services or provide less services because they won't be able to afford to. All at a time, demand is rising in support of social care. Demand is rising for the needs of social care. So why does this all matter? Well, people react well to people. Social care is about care. You need people to do it. And people need good salaries to live on. People have a variety of needs as well, so having many smaller organisations who can provide services to social care really helps in terms of providing a really good offer to our local residents. And Hillingdon is fantastic at working with local partners in order to make sure we can offer the best possible personal service and flexibility to those who need social care. Again, if we have less of these small providers available, residents will have less choice in how they are cared for and how they're looked after and how they can interact with society. So as a council, it is really, really important that we'll continue to do what we can to support these care providers in order to make sure that residents have choice. But also, we need to be honest and hold the Labour government to account for what they are doing and the impact of what they are doing.
Councillor Hagger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support this motion. Having vast experience of the charity sector for many, many years, and indeed heading and running a charity since 2009, we, like every charity and voluntary organisation, employ valuable members of staff on our payroll. When we heard the news that charities and the voluntary sector will not be exempt from this increase, we were in a state of disbelief. We are fully aware of the detrimental impact financially this will have not just on us, but everyone in our field. As you may well know, the majority of charities' funding streams are grant-based. Grants are sought after ahead of staff employed and are classed as restricted funds. This means they have to be used for the purpose they have been applied for. Funds for staff would have been inclusive only for the current rate of employers' NI and would therefore not include this proposed increase. This then leaves the charity in a deficit, as most are non-profitable organisations and having to seek extra funding avenues, all of which takes valuable time and resources which charities and the voluntary sector do not have. We could even be using donor money, which would have gone to assisting our clients in the disability sector. This rash decision by the government to increase employers' national insurance has not been thought through, putting money before people's health and welfare. The NCVO has estimated that the employers' NI increase from 13.8% to 15% announced in the budget will cost the voluntary sector £1.4 billion a year. The NCVO have written on behalf of our charity and over 7,300 charities and voluntary organisations for urgent action to be taken, to which the response was received on Tuesday this week. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has refused to exempt or reimburse the charities that estimated additional £1.4 billion tax bill. This has robbed the non-profitable organisations as our small charity and volunteers paid work tirelessly to bring life, purpose and hope to people in Hillingdon. This will have a devastating impact on those charities to reach out. It is seriously non-moralistic and an awful way of getting money from those who are desperately in need. So I say, do not exploit those who seek help from illness, disease or disability. We should administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another. This is not just about taking money away from the charity, this is about taking lives away from people.
Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The motion before us states that this council is, and I quote, greatly concerned at the proposed national insurance increase. In response, I ask, when has this administration been concerned enough before by government policy to submit any motion to council? To answer this question, my mind goes to two quotes. One from Edmund Blake regarding good men doing nothing and its consequences. The second by Pastor Nirmala, asking where were we when they came for X or Y group and we did nothing. So I ask where this administration's great concern was when the 2010 austerity programme kicked in. It did nothing. Where was this administration's great concern when there were significant reductions in welfare spending? It did nothing. What about the cancellation of the schools building programme, swinging cuts to local government funding we've heard so much about this evening? Biggest cuts to police, courts and prison service since World War II. It did nothing. Then we have the excess deaths through austerity, cutting an estimated half a year on life expectancy. It did nothing. Then NHS waiting lists, 2.5 million in 2010, at 4 million pre-pandemic, at 7 million today, and this administration did nothing. When police officer numbers were 21,000 fewer than they were in 2010, it did nothing. And nothing was said when there was a 16.6% decline in the number of people aged 64 and over accessing care, with the deterioration of their condition and the burden on their unpaid carers. So why has it taken this administration until now to speak up, expressing its great concern? It could have put motion after motion, criticising again and again government decisions, but kept silent. the difference well. Let's spell it out before it would have had to have criticised its own Conservative government. This administration could have spoken of their great concern by way of motions to Council in order to put pressure on Conservative government when they had the voice and influence. So the new Labour government is having to work with the fragile financial legacy left by the Conservative government's incompetence, shielded by this Council's absolute silence. What a completely futile motion, Madam Mayor, kicking the new government when they failed time and time again to kick their own. Thank you.
Councillor Sansapuri.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to speak against this undesired motion, as it says that government have said, but not yet confirmed, that consuls will be fully reimbursed for their direct cost arising from this change. So why this motion is here before the picture is clear? Are they running out of the ideas on how to improve this consul, or just an excuse to criticize the Labour government? I fully understand that they have right to do so, but they have never had the courage to do so when 2/3 of members of parliament from this borough were Tories, and their own parachuted member of parliament was a prime minister. Did they say anything? No. Madam Mayor, I fully agree that councils are underfunded, but who is responsible for that? The previous Tory government, which remained in power for 14 years, not the present Labour government, which is in the office for less than 6 months. And to mitigate this new pressure, what action they want to take? Nothing. Only reconfirm their self-glorifying statement of sound financial management, which is heard in this chamber so many times even today. They say that they have the sound financial management. Prove it by not making cuts, but spending more to improve public service in coming budget. Don't just say it, prove it. Madam Mayor, I am against this motion as it has no purpose, no action. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor D. Mills.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's understandable that the Labour group are very proud that for the first time in 14 years they've had a Labour government budget in which they can get excited about. But I think we just need to correct some of the homework that Councillor Streeting has put forward, because actually from 2010, I seem to recall, we actually renovated, finishing off all the libraries in this borough, did we not? Well, we continued building all the school places for the children in the primary sector, did we not? We kept recycling as one of our best records. We improved all the streets, and we improved green spaces, and we did it all with a 10-year no council tax increase. Go away and do your homework again. But are they proud about what this record of this budget is doing to Hillingdon people now? And I wonder, that's really the question that we need to ask. So, if you are receiving childcare and you are a young family, young working family, you're now going to find that your charges are going to have to go up. Who remembers? No increase for working people. Oh, what a surprise. That's been broken already. Are they proud about that? Silence. What about the voluntary groups, which, as my colleagues have already mentioned, are absolutely fabulous in this borough and do a wonderful job? Now they are faced with increased costs and the decision about how do they expand, what do they need to cut back, and who do the people are going to be affected by that? The vulnerable. Are they proud about that? Is that what Hillingdon Labour Party is standing for? And then we get the situation, as Councillor Edwards indicated, all the social care that we provide to children, to adults, where we rely upon a third party to provide the beds and to provide the care. They're getting big increases. That will be coming to us. We'll be passing it on to our council taxpayers because we're going to have to, because we can't keep on absorbing all these additional costs. And who pays that? It's the same working people that weren't going to get any increases. I tell you what, Madam Mayor, either they don't understand it or they don't care. And I think it's the latter, because what the budget also confirmed is that it gave inflation-busting pay awards to their union paymasters. They're more important than the vulnerable, than the people in care and working people trying to get childcare. That's the reality. Can I, Madam Mayor, give you, and on behalf of everyone here, what I think is an early financial health warning? When we get to February and the budget setting, no doubt we will get an amendment from the Labour group. I predict now that that amendment will be even worse and show even less financial acumen than the ones they've done in the past. In fact, I'll go further. It will be as useless as a chocolate teapot.
Oh. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is a lot of passion in the Council chamber this evening. In my opinion, I speak in favour of the motion. In my opinion, no government of any party has followed through in a commitment to reform the adult social care system in order to meet the increasingly complex needs of the population. Despite the latest promise of a cross-party approach to do that, at this moment in time, there has been no action. Whilst the commitment to raise the national living wage and improve workers' rights is welcome, the fact that plans, including a rise in national insurance contributions, remain unfunded disregards the significant pressures already facing providers. My colleagues behind me have spoken passionately about what this will do to social care and our providers, and ultimately our residents. In the conclusion of my statement, I wish to say that this Council will continue to utilise our excellent partnership working, as recently praised by the CQC report, to work with our care providers to enable them to continue to provide our residents with the good care that they have and they expect from a sound, financially managed council.
Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make it short, but I just want to remind this chamber that when the Conservatives made the same argument when Labour introduced the minimum wage, business will suffer, it will stifle growth. Did it? No. And when the Conservatives brought in the employers' pension contributions, charities and small businesses made the same argument. It's going to ruin us. It's going to stifle growth. Did it? No. Good business and good charities have built in resilience. And if they haven't, then they need to start building that resilience. And it's under the last Tory government in which they have not been able to. The impact of the trust budget crippled the economy, made the housing crisis that their government never addressed worse. And here we are again, fear-mongering, and what is the answer to their black hole that their government have left? So you can sit here in this chamber, you can send out all the messages that you want to, that the employers' NI insurance is going to cripple us, it's going to stifle business, it's going to do this. But here in this motion, government have said that councils will be reimbursed. And we don't know what that leads to right now. So this motion, I agree with my colleagues, this motion is futile, it doesn't mean anything, and actually we don't know anything about stifling growth or that. People can say all of these things. The same things have been said before, and it doesn't. The Labour government are here to address the problems that their government have left behind.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There isn't really a need for me to repeat the assessment that has already been made as to the damaging impact on this authority of Labour's reckless and ill-considered increase in national insurance. But why is this relevant? Why raise it now? Okay? May I repeat what I said earlier when I was answering the question? That actually there is a finite amount that the Chancellor has available to mitigate the pressure on local authorities and other public sector bodies. And by the 12th of December, Cabinet needs to be considering this consultation budget, which will be upcoming. So actually, as Councillor Edwards has said already, we will be incurring many millions of extra costs, and we have to decide how to deal with it in our budget. That is why it is relevant that we have this motion now. It is absolutely clear that this measure is an onerous tax on business and on public sector bodies alike. It will constrain growth in our economy, and particularly on employment, and it will stimulate inflation, and hence, ultimately, it's a burden upon us all. All of this has been put forward by a new Labour government that was promising growth, stability, and prosperity. In truth, the only prosperity that has even vaguely been attempted is to its paymasters, the trade unions. Whilst for the rest of us, our business community, our farmers, and in particular our pensioners, what we have is a declaration of economic war and a series of unbroken promises from this Labour government. Madam Mayor, the only question that needs to be answered here is this economic incompetence or is it vindictiveness? I suggest that it is both. Madam Mayor, I second this motion.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The comment was said by the opposition, this motion doesn't mean anything. It is expressly clear from the comments from the opposition that it means the opposition don't care. They don't care about the impact this is going to have on our charities, so articulately explained by my friend there, Councillor Hagger. They don't care about the impact that this is going to have on our own ability as a council to support our residents. They don't care about the impact this is going to have on our staff as we have to make savings to ensure we stay sound. It is completely callous in their disregard about the impact today and tomorrow of what is happening. And as for this side of the administration not having taken on a past government, let me remind them, not only did we have motions against our own government, we took them to court. We fought them on HS2 and we fought them on Heathrow. We'll take no lectures from the opposition about our ability to stand up when we need to stand up. And on this matter, we clearly do, because this change is going to hurt the hard-working people of this borough. And our opposition seem not to care. Thank you.
Vote those in favour of the motion. Those against.
Madam Mayor, that motion is carried.
Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the motion as set on the order paper. The theatrics that recently played out over social media from the leader of the council regarding the Beck Theatre was truly a low point for this Conservative administration. It was all triggered in September of this year by a lack of response from the council, with time running out at the end of the Beck's lease, after dialogue stretching back to 2021. Since 1977, the Beck Theatre has been a staple part of the arts and culture in my ward and a hub for the community for the whole borough. It hosts a variety of events and is well known for its children's summer programme. It supports local charities and vulnerable residents for its community initiatives. It is more than a commercial venue that sells tickets for shows. Stating otherwise is insulting to the residents who passionately use it and defend it. Now our amazing community theatre is expected to close at the very minimum for the first part of 2025, consequently leaving community groups homeless, residents left without this community hub, and a jewel in the crowd of the borough's fading fast where arts is needed. This is all wholly avoidable. As such, this motion proposes a review, an independent review, whose findings will go to the relevant Scrutiny Select Committee, so that lessons can be learned from this very alarming sequence of events.
We need this review to investigate the true cost of these decisions, to learn from any mistakes and avoid repeating them, and to ensure the Council gives sufficient time in the future for operator transitions. This review is not about blame. This review initiates reflection, time to listen and understand what lessons can be learnt by the Council. This will avoid the anguish and clear upset felt by many residents. A review would also force the much-needed opportunity for Hillingdon Conservatives to pause and reflect on their decisions. Recent years have shown us the rushing of decisions without listening to the community, which has threatened the closure of children's nurseries, forced bowls clubs to maintain their own greens, and ripped Uxbridge Library from its meaningful presence and service in the heart of the town centre, rather than locked away in this civic building. No wonder there is mistrust and cynicism from residents when the community assets are threatened. Thankfully, we do have strong consultants in place who have a community focus. However, there are no guarantees at all that Hillingdon Conservatives will listen to even their own consultants to retain the BEC's rich and diverse community offer. Let's be clear. Hillingdon Conservatives are only focused on an ambition to sell off £75 million of council buildings to cover over the cracks and their mistakes, the growing debt within the DSG, designated schools grant, and to cover up the gap in the lack of unallocated reserves, which has been brought forward by their poor management. Hillingdon Conservatives continue to let residents down. This review is crucial to determine what caused their attempt and rush to save a small subsidy for the arts of our borough to turn into such a colossal number of events. They have no long-term strategy for arts and culture in Hillingdon, and it probably cost the council more money on consultancy fees and startup requirements with a new operator. Let us not forget, when the leisure centres got a new commercial operator, they subsidised them beyond the pandemic. They invested in new equipment. So what have Hillingdon Conservatives got against arts and culture? And why, as it is so clear in the order paper before us, are they not willing to reflect, to review, to listen and to learn? Simply put, they do not want to review, as they do not want to acknowledge their ongoing mistakes. Users of the BEC should not have to pay the price. I move this motion.
Is there a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The BEC Theatre is an invaluable and cherished community asset, providing life-changing programs to enhance skills, build self-confidence and offer unique opportunities that can be found elsewhere. The BEC Theatre proudly celebrates cultural highlights like Black History Month and Chinese New Year, to name just a few, with an exciting program tailored for children and families, as well as dementia-friendly shows. The theatre truly offers something for everyone, from Western performers to community groups showcasing their talent. It's a hub for creativity and inclusion. Affordable ticket prices and free entry for carers make it an accessible space for all to enjoy. Summer Youth Project at the BEC Theatre has been a great success. Just under 100 young people from ages 9 to 19 were given opportunity to work in the professional theatre under supervision of a highly skilled creative team. It's ironic that Council strategy for 22-26, adopted in November 22, set out the ambitious goal of ensuring all our residents can enjoy culture and arts, yet here we are facing the possibility of our BEC Theatre being at risk of closure. I am concerned that amended motion shifts the narrative in a way that risks bypassing the heart of the matter, the process by which the situation unfolded. Additionally, while we welcome progress towards identifying a new operator, finding an operator who wouldn't cost the Council a penny of subsidies as a strict requirement will limit options for securing a sustainable and community-centred operator. Madam Mayor, as a responsible and fair borough, to avoid speculation and without casting aspersions on anyone involved, we call for a detailed review to address specifically a clear and accurate timeline of a negotiation process, including any deadlines and decisions made in negotiations with a past theatre operator. Madam Mayor, I second this motion.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I move the amendment to the motion as published on the order paper. The original motion is very typical of Labour, weaving into a live issue false stories to bolster political sport, but in doing so causing unnecessary concern to residents. This happened with the proposed redevelopment of the old pool site in Useley. Labour spread the rumour that we were building on the recreation ground. It happened during the election campaign. They falsely claimed that the council had done a secret deal with a local football club to build on Greenbelt land. And they did it again with Borough Hall, that we were to clear that out to sell it for housing. All untrue, all spread by the opposition, all for political gain. It's the same with the Beck, with the opposition giving credence to false rumours that Trafalgar Theatres were willing to run the theatre without monetary subsidy. But the council was seeking to close it, just because we wanted to redevelop the site. As we've heard earlier, that is simply not true. The motion, as originally put, seeks to keep these falsehoods alive by requiring a review into alleged council activity that did not happen. The council had been in commercially sensitive negotiations with a company about the renewal of a lease of one of its buildings. The council observed the confidentiality agreement requested by Trafalgar Theatres, and the idea that those negotiations could or should have been in public, or that Trafalgar Theatres would have agreed to such a proposal, is naive beyond belief. Trafalgar Theatres UK were clear in their media statement that their final offer was to extend the lease subject to the continuation of a monetary payment of over £20,000 per month, in addition to rent-free use of the building and the council taking on responsibility for repairs. The misinformation that has been circulating has not been caused by the council, and it would be ridiculous for the council to agree to spend public funds just to give some credence to the Labour's false assertions and to divert attention away from the key issue at hand of should the council continue to give away a monetary subsidy to a private profit-making company to ensure the continuation of commercial theatre. Let me just comment, the small subsidy referred to is in fact £648,000 over 3.5 years. Not quite small in my view. That is a sum the council can no longer afford. The generosity of it to expend on behalf of its residents. My amendment takes out the hyperbole of the original motion, removes the assertions as to future events that are not yet determined, and makes clear the Conservatives' position about the ending of monetary subsidy. The amendment will result in clarity on where Labour stands when it comes to making those subsidy payments. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Bianco.
Madam Mayor, I second this amendment and reserve my right to speak at the end.
Madam Mayor, if I might, just for clarification, we're now discussing the amendment as set out on page 8 of the order of business, and the amended motion, if passed, would be as set out at the bottom of page 8.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I stand to speak against the amendment, and once you hear me out, you would know why. Once a man took his ailing grandmother to a doctor as she wasn't well, not feeling well, not looking well, not breathing well. The doctor, after the checkup, gave her liquid medical concoction that she was to be given mixed with warm water 3 times a day, following other instructions listed on the bottle, such as what to avoid and shake well. The doctor said there was still time and hope of her recovery. However, 2 days later, the poor ailing grandmother died. Reason? The man had been shaking his grandmother and not the bottle. Now, the point of the story is that this amendment is doing exactly that. Shaking the grandmother, completely ignoring the bottle. That is completely sidelining the ask in Councillor Mather's motion, the review, an independent review, especially so if these were only rumours and misgivings, completely ignoring the opportunity to learn from any fiasco so as not to find the administration in a soup, despite their persistent denial, splashes of which are visible all. But tragically, only thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history, which is so true for the current Tory administration. It's truly sad. It's such a shame. I wish they actually cared. Thank you.
Councillor Mand.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I stand to speak against this amendment, as it is with great regret that this wording is labelled as an amendment when clearly the key points have not been amended, they've simply just been removed. The words delete the remainder of the motion is extremely disappointing and disheartening. It's like saying, let's just get rid of the bits that hold us to account. The current Conservative administration clearly does not like or welcome scrutiny. Where is the transparency? The Labour opposition have rightfully questioned the need to investigate exactly why the council is in this position in the first place. Surely the residents deserve an answer to the council's and cabinet's decision-making over the recent years. The seats we occupy in this chamber carry a great deal of responsibility, and the residents of Hillingdon have placed trust in all of us. It is absolutely obvious that the current Conservative administration want to run away from this responsibility and bury their head in the sands. Thank you.
Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak against this amendment because, unsurprisingly, it has been butchered by the Conservative administration to the point where it bears no reflection on or relevance to the original motion and begs the question, what is the administration hiding? There are conflicting narratives around the negotiations with the current operator. Throughout the leader's public statement, he's blamed Trafalgar for failure and continues to do so in this amendment, citing subsidy as the issue. And Trafalgar have stated time and time again that they proposed an early alternative model void of subsidies but needing a longer lease. Isn't it ironic that the leader of this council harps on about providing subsidies to a private company which enables Beck Theatre's community outreach programmes, but has no problem paying considerable sums of money to a private consultancy to do the job his administration failed to do? He now stands here asking Council to call on the Cabinet to agree terms with an appropriate operator without laying out the terms of that agreement before this Council, bearing in mind that in June 2024 the Cabinet resolved that the Corporate Director of Place would agree those terms in liaison with the Leader and Cabinet Member for Resident Services. Wasn't the Cabinet part of the negotiations that went sour? Do we trust the Cabinet, who chooses to create a public debacle, creates public dissent with decision after decision, and is forced to use a consultant because its own negotiation team have failed after playing ping-pong with the narrative? Was it subsidy? Was it rent? Was it lease? What was it? What was the deal that was on offer to Trafalgar? Furthermore, why was this council unable to meet any of the deadlines that were put to them to ensure staff did not lose their jobs and a full timetable of programming was maintained? And of course, all the delays, and not to mention the public accusations, have meant that Trafalgar walked away, leaving this council making a rushed decision at a greater expense of a private consultant. Let's all remember that it isn't like the council didn't know that the lease was going to expire. Residents have been writing to all councillors in protest and disgust at the way this council has handled these negotiations. This administration has trampled on the history and memories that have been created at the theatre, forgetting that there are residents and community groups who use the Beck as a lifeline. Madam Mayor, whilst we cannot change the past and how these negotiations were handled, we can learn from them. It is a crying shame that the Conservatives chose to stamp all over the original motion with a pointless amendment that only speaks to what they are doing, and therefore asking this council to vote for something that is already happening is as redundant as this administration.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not surprised by what we've heard from over there, but I think the fundamental point I want to get across is that this council and this administration is determined to take action on all matters and not stand around or sit around and talk about a subject endlessly while Rome burns. Our consultants are of the view that Trafalgar have taken careful steps over many years to ensure that the Beck has made a loss in order to ensure that the subsidy has continued to be paid. Trafalgar are a profit-making organisation, and clearly there's nothing wrong with that, but they're doing so now at our expense. And they ultimately only wanted to stay, as my colleague Councillor Edwards has already said, if they could continue to enjoy the cushy ride that they've been on for a number of years. Interestingly, all the parties we are currently talking to expressed in my presence an interest and determination not only to maintain their close commitments with the local arts scene, but to improve it. And many of them had interesting ideas about how that improvement could take place. So I have no doubt at all that when a new partner is found, we will see an improvement across the offering that that theatre can produce. I second this motion, this amendment.
Councillor Edwards. Sorry, Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What alarms me most about this amendment is that the Council leadership, the Hillingdon Conservatives, do not believe they will be able to reopen the Beck in the next year. All reference to 2025, without any caveats that could have been added in the amendment, is completely removed, and that is deeply worrying and concerning for myself and I'm sure for many residents. It is clear from the speeches and the tone from the other side this evening they want to avoid any responsibility in their part of failed negotiations or planning and timing of negotiations which properly hindered, I suspect, the ability to run something without subsidy. As mentioned earlier, the Conservatives are clearly looking ways at selling off and developing green spaces or open metropolitan land, and the Cabinet member earlier in his question answer didn't completely rule out the plan to develop, just said it wouldn't happen in the foreseeable. The Cabinet's approach to the series of events is eroding trust with our residents. This amendment just blames an operator who can't defend themselves or tell their side of the story. It preempts the review and is not humble enough to learn from any improvements that could have been made in future plans, contracts and negotiations. Our original motion gives the Council time to look back and learn from mistakes, hopefully a process that is embedded but clearly not within the Cabinet. They could even have used the internal audit team if they wanted to reduce costs to add value from their expertise to this review, to be more open and transparent. The series of events that led up to the current circumstance, if it wasn't so serious, could almost be considered like a pantomime. When the opposition has to tell the administration to take time and reflect to preserve reputation, you know the administration is in trouble. Ultimately, I'm sure we can all agree we need to preserve arts and culture in this borough, to expand it, to develop it, to preserve locally based, diverse community learning and arts. The Beck has provided this with its current operator, and it has been a lifeblood for many community groups, and we are grateful to those community groups for their continued service and enjoyment of the resources. This cannot and should not be lost, in whatever form the Beck is operated in future. Please vote against this amendment and for the original motion. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Yet again, we're hearing the opposition trying to obfuscate the issue. They're trying to confuse everybody by suggesting that somehow there's been some dodgy dealings going on in the background. That's not true. The idea that we could independently review private commercial discussions is absolutely ridiculous and couldn't happen. Councillor Mann, the reason. What is the reason? You think that we are hiding the reason for this. Let me be clear again, the reason for this. The reason is that this local authority, as many others, are under enormous financial pressure. We've heard that mentioned this evening. And the reason is we have spent £648,000 with a private profit-making organisation to deliver commercial theatre from the Beck. That ends. Our commitment to the delivery of arts is not commented on here. This solely relates to the funding of commercial theatre at the Beck. The Conservative position is emphatically clear. It must end. We can no longer afford it. The opposition's position seems to be, we'll just take more money from the residents. Thank you very much.
Right, can we vote in favour of the amendment? Favour, isn't it? In favour of the amendment? Yeah. Against?
Madam Mayor, that amendment is carried. That becomes a substantive amendment, substantive motion, pardon me, for which further amendments may be moved, or if there are none, you just need formal approval of council to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It would be an exaggeration to say that residents across Hillingdon have at different times faced sleepless nights worrying about the future of assets they value. Assets they grew up with, cared for, and relied on. Yet were either lost or brought to the brink of being lost because residents weren't consulted about their future. This has left many feeling powerless and deeply frustrated. Take, for example, Useley Rec, our Children's Centre, Uxbridge Library, or even the Beck Theatre. Each case reflects a failure in communication. Consultations sidelined. Decisions made despite serious reservations from local people. Residents have told us they feel silenced, cheated, excluded from decision making about the spaces they hold dear. From petitions to email trails, I believe every councillor here has been approached by residents who fear losing these assets for good. The uncertainty is exhausting for them. Is Manor Farm or Winston Churchill Theatre or Uxbridge Golf Course at risk too? Who knows? Because what Hillingdon too often fails to do is be transparent and upfront with its residents. People only find out about the plans when it's already too late, when they can only react or worse, resort to protests. Madam Mayor, I'm not denying that Hillingdon isn't facing intense financial pressure on both capital and revenue funding, and we'll need to maximize the use of publicly owned land and buildings or dispose of them and associated costs wherever possible. But transparency and inclusion must become the foundation of this approach. Do you all know, and if you do, it must seriously worry us all, that Hillingdon doesn't even have a single asset of community value registered on its list. None, while our neighbouring boroughs have aplenty. What are they doing differently? What can we learn from them? This brings me to a simple ask. We need to change how this council engages with its residents about community assets. Our role isn't just to govern, but to empower communities, to preserve what matters to them. The assets of community value process is key to this, and we must prioritize proactively encouraging and working with communities to identify assets that are valuable to them, supporting residents and groups in nominating them. We must also launch a focused communication campaign, ensuring residents from diverse communities understand their rights and how to use them. This is essential for creating awareness and giving everyone across the borough the tools they need to protect the assets they love. And once our house is in order, we must publicize and celebrate every new addition to the ACV register. Hillingdon must see ACV nominations as an opportunity and not as a threat. And as the LG guidance reminds us, local authorities are instrumental in giving communities the resources, time and voice they need to lead on preserving their local assets. Beyond ACVs, there are other tools we must consider. Community asset transfer, community right to reclaim land and compulsory purchase for communities, establishing meanwhile use in empty properties. But this just can't be about tools and frameworks. It's also about the trust. Trust this council has lost. Trust this council needs to rebuild. Trust that it will listen and act in good faith. trust that we will stand by our residents when it comes to protecting the places they love. I'll end with this thought. Someone rightly said, communities have never been built upon their deficiencies. Building strong communities depends on mobilizing the assets of people and places. Protecting Hillingdon's cherished assets, from library to community centres and parks, is not just a duty, it's a promise to future generations. Madam Mayor, I move.
Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second and reserve my right.
Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak in favour of the motion. I draw this Council's attention to the February 2024 budget, in which it was clearly stated that £75 million worth of surplus assets need to be sold to balance the finances and avoid bankruptcy. What this Council does not know, however, is how many of our community assets are on the list. With the Beck Theatre reportedly safe from this wave of asset stripping for now, what other cherished landmarks will need to be sacrificed to fill the gap? Will it be Eastcote House, Manor Farm, Compass Theatre, Southlands Arts Centre, or others that hold such cultural and historic values to our communities? Now, I'm no Mariah Carey, but if this Council carries on this path, I fear we'll all be singing, when it's gone, it's gone. And unlike the song, there's no hitting the replay button. Our community assets are gone forever. Once sold, they're gone for good, and the opportunity to preserve them and for future generations will be gone forever. Creating a register of assets of community value is more than just a protective measure. It's a statement of trust in our communities. It allows residents to come together, raise finance, and bid to keep what they hold dear in community ownership. As custodians of these assets, if the Council cannot maintain them for public good, it has a responsibility to find sustainable, community-centred solutions that keep these treasures in public hands. Because when these assets are lost, it's not just buildings or grounds that disappear, it's opportunities for connections, history, and a sense of belonging that vanishes too.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The Conservative group will be voting against this motion, not because we don't believe in the value of community, of assets of community value. Far from it. I recognise all the comments that have been made here about the importance of it, but we will be voting against it because the motion is flawed and unnecessary. What our colleagues opposite have not done is their homework, yet again. Any quick read of the legislation and guidance would have shown it is for communities, parishes, community groups and neighbourhood forums and charities, not local authorities, to identify these assets of community value. The role of the Council is to act as an arbiter of the system, making judgment about whether a nominated asset by a community group meets the statutory requirement for inclusion on our list. It is not, I repeat, not for the Council to nominate land or buildings for inclusion for the register, and the law does not make provision for us to do so. And were we to do so, the owners of that land could review that decision because it would be ultra vires. Therefore, the motion falls at its very first requirement in that it is asking us to act unlawfully. Turning to the second requirement of the motion, have Councillor Kaur and those that have spoken bothered to look on our own website, just search assets of community value, they would have been taken to a very informative page that provides clear guidance, the links necessary to the forms to nominate, information to any local group that would have helped. That is to say that we are already providing the necessary to support to community groups proposing a community asset. Therefore, the second requirement of the motion adds no value. As for the third point, Labour are very good at spending residents' money. Happily tax, happily spend according to their latest whim or idea. But on this side of the chamber, we are more careful with our money, and we see no need to launch a targeted communication campaign just because the idea has occurred to Councillor Kaur. Let me remind Council that the role of councillors includes community leadership and keeping residents informed about issues. And so the third bullet point could just as easily be delivered at no additional cost by our Labour councillors doing the job they were elected to do. Yeah. This motion is yet another example of Labour's virtue signalling rather than addressing the real concerns of our residents and the challenges this council is managing. We will have nothing to do with this behaviour and we will vote this motion down. Thank you.
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I shall be brief. What the leader has said has encompassed most of what I was going to say. But I think it's important to realise that if buildings are created as assets of community value, it comes with a liability. And that is the liability of finding something useful for that building to be used as. And more so, the issue of who's going to pay for it and how is it going to be looked after. Or are we actually creating, putting a building in Aspic and there it will sit empty and unused and maybe loved but unused because nobody can step forward and do it. And it's certainly not something the council can do. And that would have applied to Barrow Hall, that would have applied to the Beck Theatre, and that would have applied to any of the other buildings that have been mentioned. The leader has said it all. We will not be supporting this motion.
Sweeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The motion before us this evening asks that this council recognise and actively supports, repeat, supports, efforts to protect the borough's assets so that they're there for future generations to use and enjoy. These cherished assets of all types are not merely buildings and venues, they are often the magnets for people to congregate, to talk, laugh, play, work. Some venues are old, like Southlands, the only arts centre in the borough, in a Queen Anne building and in my own ward. But what a lot is packed into this quaint, beautiful and very special building. Please let me do a quick audit of some of the many activities this year. Art classes, all ages, knitting, stitching, crochet skills to share. Clubs for disadvantaged young people to build confidence and learn business skills. Music classes for all. Chess clubs for all abilities. Creative writing and poetry groups to raise spirits. A month-long literary festival. Interactive kids' holiday clubs. Art and photographic exhibitions, interactive crafting sessions, community events including the famous Teddy Bears Picnic. I could go on, and just you wait for the 2025 programme. So the building may be old, but the activities are not. It's fun time, serious thinking time, welcoming time, special time. It's a building which links West Drayton to its history, but is there to serve the present generation and is cherished by the friends of Southlands, its volunteers and the community it serves. It's an asset of community value and needs the support of this initiative, this motion, our council. At a time when council budgets are stretched, it is important to recognise that when assets are disposed of to fill our financial black hole, they can never return. They are lost forever, and part of our history and what makes us, us, is also lost. I support the motion. By the way, Southland's wonderful Christmas market this Saturday is open. All welcome. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Colleen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sadly, this administration is showing its lack of vision and innovation. I had hoped that this is something that could bring unity across the chamber. I'm sure we all know of various assets that provide social value for our residents. Some of those assets come under the ownership of the council and others don't. But the council can play an integral part in securing the future of those assets for future generations. This doesn't necessarily mean the council needs to spend lots of money, but if we work cooperatively and collaboratively with our local community, the council can facilitate innovative ways of protecting the assets of community value that are cherished by our local community. Back in 2015, I moved a motion in this council chamber for the Cabinet to consider ways in which the council could protect well-run local pubs. This was at the time when we were seeing many of our local pubs being closed and sold to property developers. Had that motion been successful, then we may have been able to have saved some of those well-run pubs that are now a thing of the past. With regard to assets under the ownership of the council, we regard these assets as public assets that the council holds, that the council is the custodian of, and as such we have a duty to protect them and ensure that the public's interest is at the heart of all decisions made about them. In some cases, this may mean that the assets are subject to transfer of ownership directly to the community or a community group, or where the council can facilitate such a transfer. Or if the asset is to be sold, then the various safeguards and conditions that the council can place on such a sale so that the asset continues to provide social value. We've recently seen this with the sale of Borough Hall, as Councillor Bianco explained earlier. This motion from Councillor Core simply asks for the council to take a lead role in raising awareness of what constitutes assets of community value, and then to work with residents and community groups to generate a list of those assets so that we have a live register of them. This will then help the council and the community to work together in securing the assets for future generations to enjoy. Madam Mayor, I support this motion, and I would urge members on the other side to rethink their intentions and vote in favour of it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did not ask the mountains to be moved. I only asked the light to be shown on the path that led to the mountains. But again, yet again, and for ease of the friends on the other side, I did not ask the council to nominate assets. I only asked to publicly list. And LGA guidance, page 11, on empowering communities through assets says, the Act requires local planning authorities to maintain a list of land or buildings which meet its definition of an asset of community value. Nominations can come from parish council or local voluntary or community bodies. When the owner of a listed asset wishes to dispose of it, the Act introduces a delay before he or she can do so to give any interested and eligible community groups the time to prepare for a bid. I never asked for nominations. I only asked for publicly listing the assets. On page 14 of the same guidance, what opportunities do these provisions offer to local authorities? The assets of community value provisions offer local authorities a valuable tool to promote partnership and a strategic approach across their area in a number of ways. First, mapping community assets. By giving communities a strong incentive to contribute to the mapping of the community assets in their area and to consider which assets they would wish to see in community ownership. I did not ask the assets to be nominated. I only asked the list to be made publicly. Madam Mayor, I deeply feel troubled that this council's decision to disregard the concerns of our residents. Time and again, people of Hillingdon have made it clear that they have felt left out of the decisions impacting the very assets they hold dear. They have protested right outside the Civic Centre forecourt, be it for Uxbridge Library, the Beg Theatre, or this evening for SRB funding. The leaders, as leaders, we have responsibility to empower our communities and not leave them feeling powerless. The ACV process was created to give residents a voice, but it seems Hillingdon has no intention of implementing it with true transparency and inclusion. Madam Mayor, like you, I love a quote or two as well. So to quote author and activist Jane Jacobs, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody. By denying this motion, the council has denied our residents the opportunity to shape the future of their neighborhoods. And perhaps the only point I agree with Councillor Tuckwell on this is our residents deserve better, so much more better, and I wish he and his colleagues could see that. Thank you.
We vote in favour of this motion. Thank you. Against? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, that motion is lost.